One of the things that's really important to understand is what causes virality, what causes reach and distribution of your brand and content, and that's the social media algorithms. And there's a lot of myths out there about these algorithms, one of which is it suppresses your reach on purpose in order to get you to pay for reach. And that's just simply not the case, because if that was the case, nobody would ever go viral.
Welcome, badass entrepreneurs. It's time to hear the world's movers, shakers, and difference makers spill their secrets for unlimited success. So strap in, for Badass Entrepreneurs Only begins now. Hi, I'm Coach Dan Gordon. Today I'm speaking with Brendan Kane. You know how everyone in digital marketing these days promises to make you go viral, and they never do? If you want to know how to get your content in front of your audience and stand out in a 3-second world, and boy, are you ever going to want to listen to what Brendan Kane has to say. Let me introduce to you Brendan Kane. Brendan is the founder and CEO of the Hook Point Agency. And with his team, they are delivering some of the most innovative marketing strategies ever released on the internet. Since 2005, Brendan and Hook Point have been trusted to generate fans and followers for billion-dollar corporations like Sony, Viacom, Paramount Pictures, IKEA. Not only that, but superstars like Rihanna and Taylor Swift have put their faith and their billion-dollar brands in the hands of Hook Point and Brendan Kane. Brendan is an international speaker and author of the best-selling book, 1 Million Followers. And he has recently released a new book called Point: How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World. I'm telling you, you better open up a Google Doc right now and get ready to take some crazy notes, because Brendan is going to share some of the knowledge that people pay him millions for. We are so fortunate to have him on the show, so let's get badass. Brendan Kane, welcome, welcome, welcome to For Badass Entrepreneurs Only.
And thanks so much. It's a pleasure to connect with you, Dan, and everybody that's tuning in for this.
I really appreciate your being here. My listeners are all entrepreneurs looking to up their game, which is why it's For Badass Entrepreneurs Only. So I genuinely appreciate you giving up your valuable time. And to begin with, I'm sure everyone asks you, Brendan, how do I go viral? We're not going to start there, but I think a good place to start is, what are some of the big mistakes people making when they're trying to promote themselves in what you call the 3-second world?
I think the first place to start is to really understand the world that we live in. So when I started in social media in 2005, there's only 1 million people on social media. Today, there's 4 billion. So there's 4 billion content creators on the planet pushing 200 billion messages into the world every day. So it's very cutthroat when it comes to grabbing and holding attention. And one of the things that's really important to understand is what causes virality, what causes reach and distribution of your brand and content, and that's the social media algorithms. And there's a lot of myths out there about these algorithms, one of which is it suppresses your reach on purpose in order to get you to pay for reach. And that's just simply not the case, because if that was the case, nobody would ever go viral. You wouldn't have an influencer or a celebrity born on social media, or even a certain brand content going viral. These social media algorithms only care about one thing, and that's user retention, meaning the more time people spend consuming content on their platforms, the more ads they can serve and the more profit that they generate. On top of it, it keeps their users off of competitors. So these algorithms are looking for content that they can seed to the widest possible audience. They want to seed you to millions of people because we are their product at the end of the day. But your content needs to be able to hold that attention for as long as possible when it's seeded to millions of people. And if it does, then the algorithms will become your best friend. If they don't, then they're going to suppress your reach and you're not going to grow. So I like to start there because it sets a foundation for how you have to view the landscape of social media, how social media works today, and what your job as a content creator is. So I would say that a lot of people, when we go back to the mistakes, they don't have that fundamental understanding. So they're not really intently focused on, A, how do I stop the scroll? But then B, how do I tell an effective story that holds that attention for as long as possible? And a lot of people are still operating off of older paradigms of what drew success on social media, when there was less content creators on the platform. What hashtags do I use? What time of day do I post? Oh, I need to post every day. And those variables don't really mean anything today.
Oh, really?
Because it's all about the content. Yeah, because let's just say that I have a piece of content that's not really strong. It doesn't hold attention for as long as possible. Why would the algorithm seed it to more people just because they chose the right hashtag, or just because I posted at a specific time of day, or just because I'm posting a lot of content, they're going to seed it to more people? That doesn't fundamentally play to the business objectives of these social media platforms, because just think about it, is if you go log on to any of these platforms and content after content after content's not engaging your attention and entertaining you in some way, what are you going to do? You're going to leave the app. And if that keeps going over and over again, then ultimately you're going to stop using that app. And I'm not going to say that they never worked. They worked when there was less content on the platforms, but just because you would use a hashtag, or just because you would post every time of day, or just because you post at a certain time of day, and your content doesn't hold up to what they're looking for, that doesn't equal their business goals, and thus it doesn't drive results for yourself.
There's a lot of videos out there that I call hey guy videos. Like, hey guys, just checking in, you're talking about, and I see everybody doing, real estate agents, business coaches. Is that valuable content? Does that work?
I would say 99% of the time it doesn't. And this was something I learned in working with Taylor Swift, because she was one of the first people that mastered it, is that she said, and it's so true, that social media is not a one-to-many platform. Social media is a one-to-one platform. Because when we're watching social media, we're typically on our phones and we're laying on the couch or sitting on a train or things like that. It's like when somebody says, hey guys, well, it's like, who is hey everybody? You're not sitting around watching it with other people. So that's where a lot of the content creators that have a lot of success is, and this was very true early on, if you saw the biggest YouTube influencers, and it still holds true today, is they make you feel like they're talking directly to you, that they are your friend. So that principle, and I'm not going to say we could probably find an example of somebody being successful with it, but majority of people are unsuccessful because it disengages the viewer. It doesn't personally connect with the other person on the other side of the screen.
Yeah. And so how do we engage someone, feel like they're being spoken to directly, from us? How do we do that in this 3-second world?
Yeah. First, let's talk about the 3-second world. So 3 seconds comes into grabbing attention, because there's so much content out there. That doesn't mean you have 3 seconds to just get your story across, because then, people wouldn't spend hours binge watching the latest Netflix show. People wouldn't listen to a 2-hour podcast. But I will say that one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're trying to tackle those first 3 seconds is they do too much. Is they try and convey too much information. They may have a title card, they may be talking, they may have captions, they may have movement, and there's so much going on that the viewer feels like, I don't know what to pay attention to, and they get left behind, and thus they scroll to the next video. So your job in those first 3 seconds is really to set a clear expectation of what you're going to deliver in this video and why it's worth them spending the time to stop and pay attention. And that can be a visual cue. It can be a title card. It can be you talking. It can be text. But you don't want to mix all of those variables together and try and do it all at the same time. Is just choose what is that visual cue, what is that text cue, whatever it may be that gets you to pay attention. So for example, YouTube is a great case study of studying thumbnails and headlines, because it is meant to grab attention in the first 3 seconds. Now, these principles can apply to Instagram and TikTok and things like that. But there is a YouTuber named Graham Stephan, and he teaches finance to millennials. And his most viewed video is how I bought a Tesla for $78. So with that thumbnail and headline, it sets a clear expectation that is unique and different and says, okay, this video is worth watching because I want to see how he bought a Tesla for $78.
Wouldn't someone look at that and go, that's a bunch of bullshit? Like, nobody can buy a Tesla for $78. Or is it creating so much curiosity that people just say, okay, I gotta figure out what this is?
Well, it got 7 to 8 million people that tuned in. So it did And maybe people, and listen, I don't have the data to say maybe
Sure.
people thought it was bullshit and they watched it because of that, or maybe thought it was unbelievable and maybe people believed it. The reality of it is he grabbed your attention. He set a clear expectation in less than 3 seconds of what this video is about, why it's interesting, and what the ultimate payoff is going to be.
Something that I was really curious about in researching you is that superstars like Rihanna and Taylor Swift get hit up all the time by people promising to do what you actually delivered on. So how did you gain their attention and their trust?
Yeah, it was a series of events. I mean, first off, I had created several partnerships with MTV, which led to those introductions. Even in that scenario, it's like Taylor Swift, for example, I had to go through many different meetings just to even get to Taylor Swift. I had to meet with her manager first, then her father, then all of her agents, and then her mother before I could get to Taylor herself. So in each, her family was very involved at the time. So in each of those, I just have a clear practice of understanding who I'm talking to on the other side of the table, understanding what their perceived challenges, obstacles, and problems are, and then articulate a solution to solve those problems. And within that, you gain trust with each one of those meetings. On top of that, I would try and glean insights from each one of them about how Taylor perceived the world. Now, obviously, there are some reoccurring themes, but people have different perspectives. So you definitely want to take those learnings and put them in the back of your head. But also, when you go into that meeting with somebody like Taylor, you also want to see if there's anything that maybe the team, I don't want to say misrepresented, but had a different perspective than what the actual perceived problem or challenge was.
I want to point to something. You were looking at how Taylor Swift perceives the world. Like you got way more interested in her than you did with yourself because you didn't get too connected to what you're selling. You got connected to your client. And I would have to guess that was a big part of developing that trust. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I would kind of almost say that people don't buy ideas, they buy solutions. It is really important when you're operating at the highest levels, but I think it still holds true even if you're working with somebody at a much lower level. But can you solve a big enough problem for the individual that you're speaking to? And is that problem a problem that they know they have or want to solve? If not, you're going to have a very tough road in terms of closing that deal or monetizing or capitalizing off the attention that you get. Like I say, it's very easy to get meetings. It's very hard to capitalize off those meetings.
What do you think you've done consistently that has allowed you to capitalize off the meetings where other people have failed?
Is really, who am I talking to? Who is the other person on the side of the table? How do they perceive the world? How do they perceive their challenges? And I often start the meeting by asking a series of questions to really get a foundation of where this person's at before I get into any type of solution or any type of conversation about what we could potentially offer them.
Would you share what some of those questions are?
I think it's different for each person. Again, it's centered around what is the biggest obstacle or challenge that they're facing today? What are the goals that they haven't reached yet, but they're trying to figure out? So it's really tailored around that. And there's many different ways that I can ask those questions based upon the individual or individuals in the room, because sometimes it's not one-on-one. So I try to get to that point as quick as possible, because if I don't understand the problems that they're facing and the obstacles they're trying to overcome, then I'm like going in blindfolded, trying to give them a solution or position my solution in a way that they may not seem deemed valuable. And then at that point, you've lost their attention very quickly.
And I think probably a lot of people would sit down with a Taylor Swift or a Rihanna and just start talking about the things that they can do rather than learning about. And I don't mean to harp on Taylor Swift. It's just interesting because we all know her. But what happens if you sit down with someone like that and you start trying to dig into what their problems are and they don't even know what it is? Like they don't have a sense of the state of the art of your business and they can't verbalize what it is.
Yeah, people at that level are pretty good with it. If you do run into that issue though, then you can just start proposing challenges. Are you experiencing this challenge or are you struggling with this? Because even in that situation, if they say no, then you know to move on and not to focus on that because you don't want to be proposing a solution to a problem that they don't believe that they have. So typically, before I get into a big meeting like that, the only reason I'm getting into that room is because there's a potential problem that we can help solve. I do have some instances where I have partners or connections at such a high level that they'll take the meeting just to take the meeting. But I typically don't like to do that unless I'm very confident that I know that they have a problem that they are aware of that I can tackle.
And have you ever turned down a meeting with someone high profile just because you think, I'm not sure this is a good fit?
I don't think I've turned down meetings. Like I've taken meetings where I don't think it's a good fit, but I want to just connect with that person that may lead to something later down the road. But I'll be very transparent. But also it's again, you get in that room and you may find something that you can provide value with. But I will turn down the opportunity to pursue meetings with people if I don't think it's the right fit.
Yeah. I'm getting a strong sense from you, Brendan, that, like I said, these people get hit up a lot by everybody making a lot of promises, and you have a sincerity about you. And I think you just show up in a room with that level of sincerity. And all the things that you're saying is, hey, if this doesn't work, that's fine. It could be a stepping stone to something else. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they get into a high level meeting, they get this thing in their head. Oh my God, this is like a make or break career thing. And it seems like you've been able to steer your thinking away from that.
I don't believe it's make or break. Now, listen, I'm sure there's some rare situations where you have a business that's really contingent upon one partnership. And I would say that's probably a tough business to be in, but there's typically most entrepreneurs in the businesses that they're building, there's so many opportunities out there. And oftentimes I have found is if certain opportunities don't work, it may point you in a different direction to take your business. So it's, are you able to learn from that experience and take those learnings for the next meeting or the next direction to take the value that you're providing? So there's always opportunity to evolve and change and adapt based upon feedback, both positive or negative, in high-level meetings.
It sounds to me like you've done a good job of not letting your ego get too involved in this. Like, oh, I failed, or...
No, I definitely have a lot of self-doubt. I'm not going to sit here and say that I feel that. But again, I'm trying to approach these things from the standpoint of how can I provide the most value to the person I'm talking to? Because if it comes off, I'm just trying to get something out of somebody.
Sure.
People will read through that super quick and it'll fall flat.
I know exactly what you mean. And I also appreciate what you said is you feel self-doubt too. I'm sure people listening to this are like, wow, he's worked with this person, that person, all these companies. He must be confident all the time. And I appreciate your honesty about that. How do you deal with your own self-doubt?
It's a constant practice. I dive into personal development pretty significantly of understanding human psychology, human behavior, integrating different practices into my daily life. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I have mastered it by any means. It's a daily exercise to constantly learn and grow in that capacity. To give you a more poignant answer, there's a choice. Are you going to let that self-doubt keep you from performing and taking steps forward and pursuing what you want to achieve? Or are you just going to push through it and keep going? And to me, I don't give myself another choice. I'm not going to let self-doubt say, oh, I have this doubt, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to use this self-doubt to understand what's really causing it and then push past it.
The reason I created this show isn't just to talk about the things that people do to be successful, but what they feel and go through. And one thing that is universally true of all entrepreneurs is that the road to success is never a straight line, right? So would you be willing to talk about a time or an incident where things went like horribly wrong and you didn't expect it, and what you did about it and how you were able to recover from it?
Yeah, the way that I look at things are always going horribly wrong, and I'm trying to put out fires. For example, is like the first technology platform I built was actually the first ever influencer marketing platform. It was built on top of MySpace, and I had created a joint venture with MTV on it. And the test results were really successful. However, it was way too early because there was no such thing as an influencer at a time, so it couldn't really scale. So I had to realize that was the case. And I don't know if I fully realized it was too early. I realized that it wasn't working in the way that I anticipated and wasn't going to be a viable business at the current point in time. So obviously I had at some point to cut that off, and I just decided to refocus my efforts and energy of what I had learned from that to move on to the next project. So again, it's definitely not easy to deal with, but in some cases you need to learn and just adapt and accept the reality of where it's at.
Did you go through a process of just feeling, oh man, I got so close, or I just feel terrible? And
oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. But I get those feelings pretty often. And I would say that early on, maybe it takes weeks to get through. Now, doing this for so many years, maybe an hour or two, but you still feel it. And I believe in terms of what I've learned about human psychology, you do have to experience those emotions. You can't just suppress them. As uncomfortable as they are, you have to go into it and feel it. And you don't let it overcome you, but you have to feel that despair or that disappointment or frustration in order to truly move through it.
And would you agree that you don't get to work with MTV and Sony Pictures without going through the hallway of fire?
I wouldn't say that, because I know people that don't do that, don't have that level of awareness. I think that it's oftentimes, again, like getting meetings can be easy if you know the right doors to open. And I started in the film industry in LA and just fostered some strong connections and just worked those connections to get that. Again, it comes back to, do you have something that's of value? Do you have something that's unique? Do you have something that stands out? Because I know plenty of people that moved to LA were in the same situation as me that weren't able to cultivate those relationships and open those doors. But I know plenty of people that don't have that level of awareness that still have had success. I think each path for people is different and people are wired differently. I just found that's the way that I've been able to achieve the levels I have and still stay sane at the same time.
Yeah, right. And, there's what I call the 3 silent killers of success, right? Sleep, stress, and productivity. Now, badass entrepreneurs never get enough sleep. We all have way too much stress, and that puts our productivity in the crapper. I found something that beats the silent killers. It's a technology that lives on your phone. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but it's sound waves that put your brain into states of relaxation and focus. Now, when I first heard about this, I just thought it was bullshit, right? But then I heard that this company, they're called Nucalm, N-U-C-A-L-M. Nucalm is being used by the Army, by U.S. Special Forces, the FBI, professional football teams, pilots, surgeons are using Nucalm instead of anesthesia. And what's his name? Tony Robbins just jumped on board with Nucalm, right? So I thought, at the very least, I got to try this. So I downloaded the app, I put it on my phone, and it just sounds like music. But oh my God, after one session, I was on fire. 20 minutes of Nucalm was like 2 cups of coffee. And then on the other side, I use Nucalm at night, and it puts me out like a light. I wake up in the morning, shot out of a cannon. Now, if you want a free week of Nucalm, it's super simple. Just text the word CALM, C-A-L-M, to this number, 213-409-8366. 213-409-8366, and text the word CALM, C-A-L-M. Get more sleep, feel less stress, and blow your productivity out of the water. Just text CALM, C-A-L-M, to this number, 213-409-8366, and get a free week of Nucalm. Free. Okay, so sorry for going off like this. I'm just super fired up about it. Let's get back into this.
I like what you say about processing those feelings and not shying away from them. A lot of people I talk to is like, God, I just don't want to fail. I'm like, then you're in the wrong business. Like entrepreneurship is the business of failure. And
Yeah, and
starting
it's
over.
interesting because sometimes I admire people that have lifelong careers because it's oftentimes an easier path. But even in today's world, it's not like it was 20, 30, 40 years ago where companies retain you for the life of your career. There's large turnover. I think that no matter whether you're an entrepreneur or working within an organization, you have to accept the fact that you're not going to be successful every time you do something.
And feeling bad is part of the experience of knowledge and learning.
Yeah, there's something to be said that I don't think you can feel good if you don't know what feeling bad is.
I think the pendulum swing, at least it's my experience, that the pendulum swings both ways. And if you're willing to go take the big risk and have the big downturns, then eventually the pendulum swings just as far the other way, where you score like a great client and you have a great success. But if you play it small and I don't want to feel too bad, then I don't think you find the pendulum on the other side where you have the great successes.
It's a matter of constantly going, and I don't know the full analogy, but I was watching a show called Showtime that was about the founding of the Lakers and Dr. Jerry Buss. And he said something to the fact that if you play the casino or the roulette table and you keep playing, you're bound to win once, but you've got to keep going and going. And I think that is a big part of entrepreneurship and success. And now, obviously, you have to learn from your mistakes and integrate those learnings to keep improving. But I do believe that if you are constantly learning and trying to evolve, that eventually it will hit.
And I want to get back to some more concrete things about what people can do. And so I want to talk a little bit about your book, 1 Million Followers, which everyone can learn more about and purchase at 1millionfollowers.com. And the thing that really interested me about the book wasn't the title, but the subtitle, which is How I Built a Massive Social Following in 30 Days. I looked at the 3 points that you give about the book, and I want to share with people what they are and then talk a little bit about it. You say that in the book, it's going to teach you how to gain an authentic, dedicated, and diverse online following from scratch, that you're going to learn how to generate personal, unique, and valuable content to engage your core audience, and that you're going to walk us through how to build a multimedia brand through platforms like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, on and on. And that's really compelling. But can anyone do this? Do you have to like completely dedicate your life, or can you knock this out in a few hours a week?
Yeah, it depends on what level you want to reach. It's like anything in life. If you want to run a marathon, okay, and you're going to train a few hours a week versus you're going to run a marathon and train 20 hours a week, there's going to be variance in results. If you want to reach the highest levels of social media, then yeah, you're going to need to put the time, energy, and effort, and a few hours a week is probably not going to cut it. But not everybody needs to reach the highest levels of social media. Some people just need a few thousand subscribers or followers and thousands of views. Not everybody needs tens of millions of views or hundreds of millions of views. So can the principles be applied for anybody? Yes. And again, just the amount of effort and energy that you put in just dictates the level of success that you're going to have with it.
If I'm going through this and I'm looking at this and say, okay, I want to gain an authentic, dedicated, and diverse online following from scratch, where do I start with that?
So we have a viral content engineering process, and the core crux of our success is research. So the biggest thing that you have to do is, in order to go viral, in order to have success in social media, you need to first understand why others go viral, why others have success. So it's the same principles of, if you want to be a lawyer, you have to go to law school and understand how other lawyers operate, how the law operates. Or if you want to be a doctor, you have to go to medical school and understand how other doctors operate, what works, what doesn't work. The same thing applies to social media. You have to have a fundamental understanding of what drives content to be successful. So that's why our whole business is focused on doing research and insights for other people. So because it takes years to master this, what we do is we go off and we analyze a specific content creator, a specific brand or format that's doing really well on social media. And what we do is we look for what's called performance drivers, because typically it's not about the content that's driving the success. It's not about the message. It's the context. It's the way it's being delivered. Because people will say, oh, I'm a tax accountant or insurance agent or a doctor. That's not sexy. That can't go viral. But it does. Like every type of information goes viral. I even know a guy that pours concrete that goes viral. So what we look at is the storytelling mechanisms that they use to contextualize their message. So there's over 50 different performance indicators that we look at. So it comes down to pacing, tonality, number of edits, those first 3 seconds, captions, title cards, all of those things that contribute to a piece of content grabbing and holding attention for as long as possible versus the things that detract from that. So again, the first place to start is, like anything in life, you have to understand what makes others successful in order to determine what is going to make yourself successful. Now, the blessing and the curse of social media is anybody can sign up for a social media account. Anybody can click the record button, and they made it super simple to create content. So there's not a large barrier of entry, but because of that, it has hindered a lot of people to actually think about what does it mean to create something successful. Like, for example, Brendon Burchard, you could look at his Facebook ad library, you could look at his landing pages, you could look at his email sequence, you look at his social videos, but there's nuance in that. Just because you're looking at it doesn't necessarily mean that you understand it. And even with Brendon Burchard, I wouldn't use him as a reference for organic social media because he hasn't really reached the highest levels of consistently going viral. So I may extend that out to other content creators that have a higher baseline. Because one of the big things that you have to pay attention to is not just the follower number, but what is the ratio of the number of views that they generate to those followers. So if you have somebody that has 1 million followers, but their average view is 10,000 views of video, that's probably not the best reference point for you because they haven't mastered the art of going viral, and there may be external factors for growing their audience. For example, Brendon Burchard, he's a master of paid media, and I have no issues with paid media. I think it's a valuable tool when used properly, but a lot of his following is probably created because he's so effective at paid media and selling his course and generating leads. So that external force led to followers and not necessarily his ability to create viral content organically. Versus somebody like Jay Shetty, who's built a massive audience because he really understands organic and has mastered that. Now, he does run paid for his offers now, but he built his whole following off the back of understanding viral content and how to produce it. So that may be a better reference to analyze.
It seems like this is a little bit in opposition, the first and second points in your book, because what you're saying is look at what people are doing and do something like that. But in the second thing, it's learn to create personal, unique content. So if I'm trying to do what other people are doing, in essence, then that's not personal and unique.
But that's a big distinction there is
okay.
You're learning the way that they're telling their stories. They're contextualizing their message and then applying it to your message. So we're not saying Jay Shetty talked about this, so you should talk about this. We're looking at, okay, this is how Jay Shetty opens his first 3 seconds. This is the pacing and tonality. This is how he uses by cutting stock video into it. This is how he leverages meme cards. So we're dissecting the way that he tells his story to then say, okay, now that we understand these principles, now you can apply it to your message. So when we work with clients, we never change who they are or the message that they want to deliver. We change the way they deliver that message. And that's a huge distinction there. So we're not saying, okay, Brendon Burchard is talking about this subject matter, so you should talk about this subject matter. That's not what we do in our research at all.
Someone like Gary Vee, who's very popular, I just don't necessarily agree with the way that he delivers this kind of hard edge, sometimes almost shaming way that he delivers things, but yet he's very popular. How would you take that and transform it into something that's easier going, but still has that kind of attraction?
I would say choose a different reference. Why do you have to choose Gary Vee? He's not the only content creator. And I wouldn't say that he is the most viral content creator. Is he good? Yeah, he's good. But is he reaching the highest levels of kind of that view to follower ratio? No. A big part of Gary's format is his charisma. Like, he is a force of nature, and that force of nature doesn't work for everybody. So there's so many different references that you can look at. So if you don't like the tonality or you don't like the way that they're expressing themselves, then you just find somebody else.
What you're saying is look at the structure of the content, not specifically the content itself.
Absolutely. It's like copywriting or writing, or let's take screenplays in movies, for example. There is a clear 3-act structure to it.
Yeah.
There is clear story arcs and character development. So you understand the structure of it. You wouldn't start writing a screenplay until you understood that structure, because it would just be all over the place and nobody would be able to follow and disconnect from it. So it's like in screenwriting, you learn the structure, the 3-act structure, the hero's journey, character development, inciting incidents. And then once you understand that structure, you can start integrating your story into it. It's the same thing with music, is you learn the fundamentals of music before you create a song. And then once you understand the fundamentals of creating a song, then you can take it in different ways.
Is there something of an analogy between movie in the 3-act structure and social media content? Is there something of a 3-act structure in that?
Not necessarily a 3-act structure, but there's similarities in that. Like, there's a YouTuber called Darman, and he creates almost like short story soap operas. And in that, there is a clear beginning, middle, and an end to it. And it's one of the reasons that he's successful. Now, there's a lot of other variables that he has mastered that has caused that level of success, but that's one thing. So I wouldn't say that there's a clear 3-act structure, but there is definitely something that's done really well in good movies is building tension, releasing tension, building tension, releasing tension. Because if you see a piece of content where it's a flat line of emotion, or even Gary Vee does this really well, he'll get super hyped, he'll bring it down a little bit and then get super hyped again. He's not at 100 miles an hour the entire video.
Right.
If you watch it, there is pacing and tonality to it, which makes him such an effective storyteller. One of the other principles that the top YouTubers make that applies to tension is Jenga theory. So if you ever played that game with a stack of blocks on it, where each person goes around and takes a block out, is if you think about that, first off, you know what the end outcome is going to be. The whole blocks are going to fall over. But the real art of it is with each person pulling out a block, there's a sense of tension. Is it going to fall? Is it going to fall? And then when it pulls out, then you have this sense of the tension being released. And then you move it to the next one. So that's a big part of making effective content that's similar to movies, but a little bit different because you're dealing with a shorter time frame with content on social media.
So interesting that you say that, because it's such a compressed amount of time, these 15, 30-second videos. And it's like, wow, can you create and release tension? But there's a lot of videos that go viral that are about building something or trying to accomplish something. And it really is amazing how connected you get so quickly to how is this going to play out.
It's definitely consideration a variable. Like, you want to, again, as we talked about earlier, set a clear expectation and deliver on that expectation. And that can happen in 15 seconds. It can happen in 15 minutes or 2 hours. Like, as long as and again, each platform is a little bit different. So the variables of what users are expecting and how that story to be developed is different. Like, a video that works really well on TikTok may not work on Instagram because of the consumption behavior. So at a high level, yes, again, there's a lot of nuances that go into really understanding how to effectively capitalize on that.
And do you use applications like Hootsuite where it just puts it out everywhere? No. Okay. Why not?
Because I think it disconnects you from really understanding what's going on. Is because if you have a set it and forget it attitude, then are you really learning? Are you learning with each piece of content that you're creating? And that's a big part of our process too, is producing a single piece of content at a time that's based upon the research and findings we have. Instead of batch producing content all at once, posting it, and then reviewing the result, because you're not learning on a granular level. Versus if you do the research, you set a hypothesis of what you think is working, you produce a single piece of content, and then you review the results to determine, did it work or did it not work? It gives you insights for the next piece of content versus if you produce 10, 15 pieces of content on a single finding, there's so many different variables that can be going on in each of those 10 to 15 pieces of content. And that's where I just worry a lot about those types of platforms, Sprout Social, Hootsuite, because I think it really disconnects you from learning from each piece of content that you're producing.
What you're saying is when you do that, you put something out there and you're not really looking at the traction that you got on it, or if it worked, or why this one worked. You're just hoping that something sticks. And
in that model, yes.
Yeah. And then you don't really learn anything from it, right?
Yeah, because let's just say you produce 100 pieces of content and one goes viral. In that current process, you're not going to understand why it went viral, so you're not going to be able to reproduce it.
Wouldn't you just look at the piece of content and go, well, let me just make something similar to that? Or does it have to do with the content that came before it?
No, it doesn't. But again, even in that scenario, what was it about that piece of content that caused it to go viral? Was it the pacing? Was it the tonality? Was it the number of edits? Because when we look at formats, what we do is we have a research process that's called gold, silver, bronze. So we can take a single format, like a reaction type format, for example. So we were just breaking this down, lawyers react. So there's like a crazy video of something happening and the lawyer breaks down the legal ramifications, like who would be at fault, a scenario like that. So within that, gold is the highest performer. So we found videos that are doing 20 to 40 million views a video. Silver is the average, which is probably around 1 million views. And then the bronze is the underperformers, which we found some that were only doing 10,000 views. And this is the exact same format. So what we do is we look at the performance drivers in the gold, these nuanced details of how they're telling their story. And then we see, do they show up in the silver and bronze? Because if they show up in the silver and bronze, then we know that's not the reason and we cut it out.
That's not it. Wow.
So again, let's just say we do the reaction type format and it goes viral once. We can't just say it's the format, because you may be able to do that format 5 other times and it doesn't produce any results. That's why it's important to understand these nuanced details in order to replicate that level of success.
That's brilliant, Brendan, because what I hear you doing is, okay, this was successful. Was it this part that made it successful? Well, no, because this part is in the bronze and the silver. So it can't be that. It's got to be something else. And it's a much more strategic way. It's a brilliant strategic approach, because I hear so many times people saying, just put something out there and see what happens and then do something else like it. But I really loved your strategy because you're getting macro on what specifically was it. Can't be this, because those things are in these lower performing videos that didn't work.
Yeah, an analogy is, let's just say that a movie comes out about aliens, and it's super successful. And then every other studio says, okay, because this was successful, we're going to produce an alien movie. And typically that doesn't work, because there's these nuances that cause that level of success. Like Independence Day was a huge success. And then other people tried to duplicate that success with other alien movies, but doesn't yield the same type of result, because there's these variables within that caused it to be successful, that caused it to engage audiences.
Yeah. I think it comes back to a level of authenticity. What you were talking about in the beginning, when someone's watching a video of me and they feel like I'm talking directly to them, there's got to be a level of authenticity. Like they feel like they're really getting Dan, not a hyper-realistic version of Dan.
Yeah, authenticity plays a role, but authenticity takes many different factors. We have a communication algorithm that we apply to all of the content that we work on. And it's backed by 1.5 million communication assessments done worldwide. And it's actually used by Pixar in all of their scripts and in their marketing. And what it does is it breaks down the different ways people perceive content. And they perceive content in 6 different ways. So the largest subset of the population, 30%, perceives the world through feelings and emotion. So they're going to perceive content based upon how it makes them feel, an emotional connection. 25%, the second largest, is fact-based. Does it make sense to me? They want data, information, facts, who, what, when, where, why. The third largest, 20%, is fun-based. So they're very reactive. They want to have energy and fun with the content or brand they're interacting with. 10% is values and trust. So is this content, is this brand committed to me? Are they trustworthy? Are they dedicated? 10% is reflective. So these are the people that just stare off into space and reflect on the world. So that's the stories you hear about Albert Einstein. He would stare out in the window for hours on end, reflecting on everything to come up with his best theories. And then 5% is action-based. They just want to move, do things. So if you've ever seen Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, he's not thinking, he's not feeling, he's not having fun. He doesn't have opinions. He's going, he's running the entire movie. So when you talk about authenticity, people feel that in different ways. So the feelings person is about the emotional connection. The fact-based person is, does this make sense? The fun-based person, is this fun? Is this engaging to me? So that word and concept of authenticity is expressed in different ways, and people perceive content and whether they are engaging with it or it's engaging for them based upon how they perceive the world.
That's brilliant. For people who are geeks like me, where would we find that information that you just shared? Or is that something that you guys created?
Yeah, so if you go to hookpoint.com, I have a deck that you can download. It's in both of my books as well. We break it down there too.
And I really appreciate the giveaway, Brendan, because sharing what you learn and your gifts with others is big core of creating your brand. And I think just talking with you, and I know we're tight on time, so I want to wrap up, but in the short time that we've been talking, there's a strong sense of your personality, your integrity, and your dedication to create great work. Not how you're going to hit the big score, but creating great work. And I really appreciate that about you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
What's next for Brendan and Hookpoint?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have refocused our energy and effort on research and insight. So we actually launched a new community, if you go to goviral.hookpoint.com, where our team every week breaks down an influencer, a brand, a content format that's going viral. We do the research and insights and actually deliver them to you so you can start learning these nuances and applying them to your content. Because again, it takes years to master these things. So that's like a big focus for us, is working with content creators and brands of using these research and insights to really fuel their success across any content platform that they're trying to perform on.
That's amazing. Would you give that website again, please?
Yeah, it's goviral.hookpoint.com.
Goviral.hookpoint.com. And I want to encourage everybody to go to 1millionfollowers.com and get Brendan's book, 1 Million Followers, which is how I built a massive social following in just 30 days. Thank you so much for your time, for your focus, for all this information that you share. This is priceless information for my audience. For most of us, it'd be impossible or really expensive to gain access to someone like you. So having you share this is a rare treat for all of us. So thank you, Brendan, for being on For Badass Entrepreneurs Only.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, one last thing. If you're feeling stuck in business life, wherever, download my book, Jumping the Gap, Kill Your Story and Take Action. In this book, you'll see how the stories that you tell yourself are stopping yourself from living your greatest life. Just text the word GAP, G-A-P, to this number, 213-409-8366. 213-409-8366, and text the word GAP. It's a short read, it's fun, it's easy, and if you hate reading like I do, you can grab the audiobook. It's at that same link. Just text the word GAP, G-A-P, to 213-409-8366. You'll love it. All right, that's it. Go out there and be badass today.